The gavel hit like a gunshot. Maya Carter stood frozen in the courthouse hallway, the judgment paper trembling in her hand. A few lines of legal jargon had just decided the fate of two children she'd never met, and in the eyes of the state of Washington, she wasn't Maya anymore. She was a man, and she had just lost them. She should have been furious, she should have been protesting, demanding someone listen. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something she hadn't expected, a deep, hollow ache in her chest. It was the kind of pain that didn't care about politics or talking points. It was the kind of pain that ripped right through every opinion she'd ever held about custody battles, and left her wondering how she had been so wrong for so long. A month earlier, Maya Carter had been exactly the kind of person to roll her eyes at stories like this. At 34, she built a reputation as a loud, unapologetic voice in Seattle's activist circles. Her blog, The Modern Matriarch, had tens of thousands of followers, each post a mix of sharp commentary, trending hashtags, and unapologetic feminism. She had a knack for picking apart what she called the tired myths of male oppression, and nothing got her audience riled up faster than custody complaints from divorced dads. They just can't handle not being the center of the universe anymore, she'd said on a recent podcast. The courts side with the best interest of the child. If they lose custody, it's because they weren't fit parents, period. The host had laughed. Her audience had applauded, and Maya had moved on with her day, never giving it another thought. It was a Tuesday night, raining the way it always did in March. Maya had been driving home from a dinner with friends, sipping a decaf latte, humming along to the radio. The light turned green at 5th and Mercer, and she eased forward. She never saw the truck. The impact came from the driver's side, a blinding flash of metal and glass before the world spun and went black. When she woke, she was lying on a gurney in Harborview Medical Center. Her head throbbed, her ribs ached, and an unfamiliar police officer stood at the foot of her bed holding a clipboard. "You're lucky," he said. "Could have been worse. We'd got your ID. Rest easy." She didn't remember handing him her wallet. But later, she would learn that, in the chaos of the crash, the other driver, dazed, bleeding, their belongings had gotten mixed, his wallet in her tote bag, her ID nowhere to be found. The man's name was Daniel Holt, 42, divorced, father of two. The kind of man Maya had once described in her blog as a custody battle cliché. She didn't know that yet. What she did know, a week later, was that an envelope arrived at her apartment addressed to Daniel Holt. Inside was a notice from the King County Family Court, a custody modification hearing. She almost tossed it in the trash, until she saw the date. 2 days away. She tried calling the number on the letter. After 30 minutes of transfers, hold music, and confused clerks, the voice on the other end said, "Ma'am, our records show you are Mr. Holt. If this is a dispute, you'll need to bring identification to the hearing," which would have been simple if her own ID hadn't been lost, and if the DMV hadn't told her the replacement would take 3 weeks. She showed up to court just to explain the mistake. That was the plan, but somehow, it didn't go that way. The judge didn't ask for much, just a name for the record. She said Maya Carter. The clerk looked confused. "Ma'am, your case is under Daniel Holt." Her protest barely made it past the bench before the judge waved it off. "We're here on a modification hearing. Let's proceed." She could have walked out. She could have refused. But something in the tone of the judge's was, the casual dismissal, kept her rooted to the spot. She'd come to clear up a clerical error, but now she was curious. The woman across the aisle, late 30s, sharply dressed, sat flanked by 2 attorneys. Her eyes never softened when they landed on Maya, and then the accusations began. At first, Maya thought it was absurd. Words like inconsistent, parenting and failure to provide, claims that he missed child support payments, followed by the mother's attorney explaining that Daniel should be restricted to supervised visits. What startled Maya wasn't just the speed. It was the way no one in the room seemed interested in whether any of it was true. When she tried to speak, to clarify, the judge cut her off. "You'll have your turn, Mr. Holt." That night, she couldn't stop thinking about it, and the next day, when she got another notice, this time about arrears in child support, she decided to see it through. Just until her ID came in. Just until she could hand the whole mess back to Daniel Holt. But in the weeks that followed, seeing it through turned into living it. She learned what supervised visitation meant. 2 hours in a cramped, fluorescent-lit room where fathers sat in plastic chairs while their children played under the watch of a caseworker with a clipboard. She learned what garnished wages felt like when the state took money she didn't even owe. She learned how friends drifted away when you said the words custody hearing out loud. And she learned that when you were a man in family court, everything you said sounded like an excuse. By the time her new ID arrived, Maya had been Daniel Holt for nearly a month. Long enough to hear the numbers in court. Less than 20% of fathers in contested cases or awarded primary custody. Long enough to see a mother contradict herself on the stand and still win. Long enough to watch the life of a man she'd never met be dismantled one hearing at a time. And on the day the judge's ruling came down, she realized she wasn't just watching anymore. She was feeling it, the loss, the quiet, aching humiliation, the sense that the truth didn't matter because the verdict had been decided before you walked through the door. When the court finally corrected the identity error, Maya could have left it all behind, but she didn't. Instead, she wrote an article for her blog. The month I lived as a divorced dad, she didn't hold back. She described the waiting rooms, the clipped tones, the paperwork that treated you like you were guilty of something you couldn't prove you hadn't done. She wrote, admitting they'd never thought about it before. Weeks later, Maya sat on the courthouse steps, watching the afternoon crowd spill out. 2 men in work boots left alone, heads down. A man in a suit stopped on the sidewalk, wiping his eyes before about the numbers and what they meant for men who didn't have an accidental swap to force someone else to see it. The post went viral. Thousands of men left comments, stories eerily similar to Daniel Holt's. Women wrote too, some angry, some crossing the street. She thought about the paper still tucked in her desk, the one that had declared her unfit to raise children she'd never met. She thought about the fact that, somewhere, Daniel Holt was still living this reality every day, and she wondered how many more stories like his would never be heard.